Welcome to starting method number 2, underpainting. Master painters like Bouguereau and Vermeer have used underpaintings. They even let the underpainting show through in the shadow areas of their portraits. In today's workshop, I'm going to show you the steps that I took to complete this underpainting of Emmeline. We start with a black and white photograph, and it needs to be the exact same size as the head you plan to paint on your canvas. If you don't have Photoshop, you can work from a printed photograph. You'll need a proportion tool to perform one-to-one measuring. Make sure the head on your screen or your printout is exact same size to be painted on your canvas. We'll start by lightly wiping down our canvas with a little bit of walnut oil on a cloth. Discard any oil-soaked rags into a container with water. We'll be using Transparent Oxide Brown oil paint. I recommend using a soft-haired brush. Use a kneaded eraser or Q-tips to remove paint. In step 1, we're going to find the top of the forehead. So you're going to measure at the top of your canvas to where the hairline meets the forehead and just make a little tick mark. Then we're going to find the bottom of the chin. So you'll be measuring from that tick mark to the bottom of the chin. And then you'll make another tick mark. Next, we're going to find the inside corner of the right eye, which is where we'll be starting our underpainting portrait. So you can see here at the green arrow, just locate that with your proportion tool, and this is where you will start. Then we're going to find the width of the right eye. So measure with your proportion tool from the inner corner to the outer corner of the eye. And we're looking at the angle as well. That's why the paintbrush is laid across the eyes that way. When you're looking at angles, think of hands on the face of a clock. With the next step, you're going to find the height of the right eye. So we're going to measure from lash line, the upper lash line to the lower lash line. And then solidify that point with a little extra paint. Okay, step 6, we're going to find the inside corner to the inside edge of the iris. This is a very important measurement to get correct. The white of the eye really helps determine that the look of your subject is conveyed into the portrait. If the whites of the eyes are off, your likeness will be off. So we're going to measure everything a few times throughout our underpainting process. You can never measure too much. So I'm just showing you the painting sections of the underpainting in double time. I don't actually paint this fast, so I didn't want to drag that part out. It's just as if you were sketching with a pencil, but instead we are drawing with paint. And the beauty of the walnut oil is it lets your paint stay movable for at least a day or two. So have no fear while you're painting. Everything is fixable. Nothing's permanent. So you should have your computer monitor next to your easel so you can see your reference. And now we're going to check the width of that right eye. And let's compare it to our reference. It's looking pretty good. Let's check the height of the right eye. Compare it to our reference. And I think we're going to check the inside corner to the inside edge of the iris, making sure that is good, and check the width of the iris. So it looks like our eye's shaping up pretty good right now. Okay, I'm just going to continue painting the right eye, and I will keep measuring along the way to make sure that nothing gets moved or out of place or too far away from me. I tend to grow my features while I'm painting larger than what they actually should be. And because I've painted portraits for a while, I know this about myself, so I like to keep my proportion tool handy and measurements happening often. And there's no worries because you have a couple of days to move things around and edit as needed. You can see here I'm going to check the height of the eye socket shadow. So we're going to use that inside corner eye point to find the inner lower eyebrow line. So you can see here how finding your initial points lead to other points. So if the initial points are not in the correct spot, the rest of your face is going to be off. As your drawing skills get stronger, you'll be able to eyeball a lot of these measurements, which will allow you to go ahead and paint in areas and then check with the proportion tool to see if you got it correct. And you'll see that your skills have improved because more times than not, you'll notice that the features have been put in the correct spot. If you're new to portraiture, I recommend that you take your time finding the initial points and laying down your initial brush strokes. Now, my underpainting technique follows the idea of what we're going to learn next, Selective Start, where we pick an area to start and we paint that area or feature to full detailed completion before moving to the second feature. And that pattern continues to repeat until you have completed the entire face. And we'll see more of that for Selective Start, where we start painting the same way but using color. So here's a close-up view of our eye. I think we've done a good job, and it's time to move over to the nose. So since this is following a Selective Start painting ideal, you can choose to either go down to the nose, or perhaps you want to just go over the bridge of the nose and into the left eye instead. It's totally up to you. You do want to keep connecting your brush strokes. However, I like to lay down a brush stroke and then the next brush stroke is connected to that initial one, either by lying just beside of it or overlapping with it slightly. For instance, I don't paint one eye and then jump across the canvas and paint the second eye and then connect the two after that. I'm always touching one brush stroke to another brush stroke. Underpaintings can be beautiful in their own right. You can bring an underpainting to such degree of finish with a high amount of detail, and it can stand on its own. It can be a work of art just as is. Really, the main thing to remember when you're doing an underpainting, the purpose of it is to find the correct placement of your features and capture the likeness early on of your subject, and to pay attention to values. So position of details and values, those are the two main things that you are concentrating on while painting your underpainting. Because once you have those solidified, then you let the underpainting dry to the touch, and now you can come back on top of it with your full color, and you don't have to worry about measuring and thinking about value, other than matching the value of your underpainting to the colored brushstroke that you're laying on top of it. Remember that our measurements on the computer are exactly the same as the measurements are going to be on our canvas. So if you're working from a computer screen, make sure that you're zoomed in to the exact same size of face as what you have on your canvas. And that if you're using a printout, make sure that the printout is the exact same size as the face that you're going to be painting in your portrait. They have to be equal to be able to do one-to-one measuring with your proportion tool. It can be helpful to jot down the percentage of your zoom if you're using the computer. So if you want to zoom in really close to a feature so you can see it big, then you know to zoom back to that certain percentage level, and you've got it written down so you won't forget. So it's always a good idea to use a transparent paint, I'm using oil paint, when doing your underpainting. Today we're working with Transparent Oxide Brown, but if you want to try combinations of other transparent paints, you can. Like sometimes I mix a little transparent green color in with the brown, or a little red, transparent oxide red if I want to red it up. You can make things more neutral or warmer, cooler, just depending on which color transparent paints that you want to use. Now, if you're planning on painting color on top of your underpainting, it's a good idea to keep the underpainting in a warm tone. So for instance, if you use blue as your underpainting color, it's going to be very difficult when you're painting your flesh tones on top of the blue. You're going to constantly be fighting to warm those up and make sure that they don't grow too neutral or cool. I tried a blue underpainting once and I will never do that again. For features like the mouth, I like to go ahead and find several points and then paint in that feature. You can see here that I'm demonstrating that technique. It just makes painting in the feature a little more free, a little less cumbersome of having to stop and make all those measurements before I can continue. This works better for an area like the mouth. It's a little more loose. And another thing with mouths, I don't think mouths with a lot of hard edges is ever a really good idea. So you want to keep the edges, especially around the upper lip area where it goes into the light of the skin, with soft edges. Any good portrait is going to have a variety of edges, so you want to have a combination of hard, soft, and then some in-between edges. Squinting is helpful to see the values in your reference material, so you can squint at your computer screen or your printout, and it'll really help solidify whether what you're painting is a dark value, a middle value, or a light value. Value is what gives our face a 3D effect. If you don't have enough value in your portrait, your face will be flat and lifeless. We're using the white of the canvas to represent the whitest or lightest value in our portrait. And really the only areas where white is going to be showing through is the highlight in the eyes, and there's a couple of little highlights around the mouth. But other than that, the whole portrait is covered. Even the whites of the eyes, which are never painted white, are going to have some value on them. I've painted in all the features now, taking care to measure along the way and make corrections on the spot. So if you're seeing something's off, fix it right then, don't wait. And now we're going to go into the side area of the head where you see that flower. And when you're working in a darker area and you want to remove paint, you just use your kneaded eraser. You can squeeze that into any shape so it works well. And Q-tips work great, or if you need something a little bigger, you could use a squished up paper towel or a cloth, old t-shirts. And once you've got some nice paint down, you want to lightly brush across that with your fan brush. You want your underpainting to end up being smooth, so if you do paint on top of it, the paint's going to go on a nice smooth surface. You don't want bumpy ridges of paint. You don't want to be able to feel the brush strokes that you've laid down. As I come closer to the end and I have all the features laid down, I like to go back over and measure the entire face just to make sure everything's in the correct spot so I can make any corrections as needed before I move into a more completed phase of the portrait. And once that I've double checked and triple checked all of the measurements for the features and I know everything's in the correct spot, then I'm going to go back in and do a little bit of what I like to call refinement, where I really focus on putting in any little more details that I feel I want to show in the underpainting. Okay, when it's finished, you just let it dry for a couple days and then you are ready to paint on top of that or let it stand as a beautiful work of art on its own. Welcome to the Selective Start method. I'm excited to share it with you. So you may be wondering, what is Selective Start? Is it right for me? It's for anyone who, if you're like me, you're a little impatient about getting to paint the good stuff, make the powerful brush strokes, like you just want to eat dessert first. Selective Start is about going from the parts to the whole. It's selected because you select a point to start, complete it, then select an adjoining part, Complete it, and this repeats until the fully finished, beautiful painting is staring back at you. If you can learn to see the shapes along with their colors and values that make up a feature and then paint them in the correct spot, you can do Selective Start. Okay, let me take you through my steps. The first thing I do is get my reference image ready. You can do this in Photoshop, but you can also do it manually. Divide your reference image into quarters. Set your zoom so your head is the same size on your screen as you want it to be on your canvas. Use a proportion tool and a ruler on your canvas to determine the size of the face. Then hold your proportion tool on the computer monitor to see if you have the head the correct size. This image is too small, so we're going to zoom out, and then now it fits perfectly. We want a 7.5-inch tall head. No Photoshop? No problem. Just print out your image with the head the correct size, and we can put it into a clear sleeve and then draw grid lines on top of that. Lay it on your canvas just to make sure that it fits and it looks the same size that you want in your portrait. Then I like to divide my canvas into quarters with lightly drawn grid lines. Usually an erasable colored pencil is what I use. The image is ready, the canvas is prepped. Now we have to mix our palette. I like to have my palette completely mixed before I start painting when I'm doing Selective Start. However, while you're painting, just plan to be mixing new colors as needed along the way. Okay, palette's mixed, let's paint. To begin, decide on a starting point. We'll be using our grid lines to help us find the position. Then use your grid lines to continue finding the points on the feature that you're painting. We're working on a pupil of the right eye at this point. And then you're going to continue measuring with one-to-one measuring using your proportion tool. So we're marking the width of the pupil from our vertical grid line here, and then we're checking to see that it's correct. Once you have a concrete starting point, you just want to paint out from there and keep checking the measurements against your computer screen. They're going to be exactly the same on the computer screen as what you see on your canvas. And you want to paint in detail from the start. That's the beauty of Selective Start, getting right to the juicy points. Whatever feature you're working on, you want to look at it as if it's made of little mosaic tiles that are of different color and different value. After you've painted an area, go ahead and check the measurements again, and you want to check it from different points, different grid lines. If anything's not in the correct spot, make sure you fix it before you move on. So I'm moving from the right to the left in this eye, and I'm not sure how far to go before I see the pink there. So I'm going to measure with the proportion tool so I know where to paint the pink. I'm going to check the width of the eye again from the vertical grid line. So when I'm first beginning a painting, I go very slowly. I check my measurements quite often because everything that I'm going to be doing from this point moving forward is going to be based off of the position of this feature. So it must be correct. When something's wrong, make sure you fix it right away. So we just saw that that lower lash line was a little bit too far down. We fixed it, we measured it again, and now we know it's correct. I like to set up my canvas with my palette on the right side because I'm right-handed, and then my computer screen is very close there on the left. And I usually work across towards the next eye when I start with an eye, but you don't have to. You could go down right into the cheek and the nose, or you could go up into the forehead. So I'm measuring against the grid lines to find my second feature. So we were just measuring how high up from the horizontal grid line, and we measured how far out from the vertical grid line. We're going to continue painting that left eye, checking our measurements as we go. We're looking at angles, and we're just making sure that each brush mark is put in the correct spot with the correct value. If not, we're going to go right back in and correct it. I'm not super concerned with color at this point. I'm more concerned with getting the correct value laid down. And there we're just checking the eye position against the initial eye. And everything's lining up good, the angle's good, so we're going to keep working. I can't emphasize enough to really take your time, put your brush strokes down slowly, check things. I even sped up a little bit the demonstration here. Otherwise, we'd be painting for like 6 hours just to get the first two eyes, and you would be seriously bored. Remember, we're completing the feature that we're working on to its fullest detailed level, so that does take time. And eyebrow placement is very important to really catch the resemblance and likeness of your subject. The eyebrows, they must be in the correct place. So with the Selective Start method, you just continue repeating that process until you've worked your way down and across the face, and you've completed one feature, and then you move to the next feature, and just keep measuring and then moving to the next one. It's really simple, the process. Just complete a feature and then paint the adjoining feature and keep doing that, but checking your measurements along the way. And each time I'm laying down a brushstroke, I'm thinking about how can I make this brushstroke interesting or creative. And that might even be by using a different shaped brush, maybe one that's a little bigger than what I think I need, or one that has bristles that are splayed out, or just get creative in your thinking with mark making. I have an artist friend of mine, and she wanted to have some unusual marks in her painting. And seriously, she went into her backyard and she saw that she had a dead squirrel. She actually cut his tail off and used it to paint with. She is far braver than I could ever be. I don't think I could have gone that far, but I gotta say, the squirrel tail really did make some nice marks. So looking at our little reference of the mouth here, can you see the different shaped, colorful tiles that make up the mouth and the chin here? And can you see how we're just laying down a brush stroke that's not much longer than the actual bristles of the brush itself, and leaving it? We're not doing any blending. Every time you lay down a brush stroke with Selective Start, the first brush stroke goes down and then the next one either lies beside it, it overlaps it slightly. There's no blending them together. You just keep laying down short, succinct brush strokes until an area is covered. Now don't worry, just because you finished a feature and moved on, it doesn't mean that you can't go back later and adjust it or refine an area. I often do that. So you can complete the face and then always go back over it. So to help soften up some of my edges, I like to lightly dust over my portrait with a fan brush. I really find these useful, and you can brush over an area and then paint detail back into it. You don't have to leave it too soft and fuzzy. That's not a great look. And then I also like to use rounds. That's one of my favorite brushes. I usually use zeros, twos, fours. I stay pretty small. And then flats, I use those for the larger areas like the hair and the backgrounds. But my secret weapon brush is the comber. It's like little combs, and it makes such a beautiful mark. And when you're just laying down bits of brush strokes, they kind of lace together, and it just makes a beautiful effect. I don't use mediums a lot. I try to avoid them. Mostly I am painting with just oil paint straight out of the tube, but I will use walnut oil on occasion. So let me just review. I started with the right eye, moved across the face to the left eye, then I came down, did the cheeks, painted the nose, then we moved into the mouth and chin, and then we came back up to the forehead. The eyebrows always make a good stopping point if you're going to save the forehead for later. It's nice when you stop painting an area to leave a little bit of flesh color around a feature, so that when you're painting back into it, it kind of blends together more gently and it's not leaving a really hard line. Good portraits have a variety of edges and line throughout them. You want soft edges, hard edges, and in-between edges, and having the correct combination of those can really make your portrait look masterful. So with this portrait, I was really looking to emphasize the focal point, the area where I want the viewer to really look at first or notice the most, and that would be the right eye. And in order for me to have that happen, I needed to have the most contrast and the highest degree of detail in the right eye, the focal point. And so what that means is that anything that's further away from that focal point is going to start to get blurrier and softer. So I made sure to paint the left side of the face and then a little bit further down, like towards the mouth, with soft edges. The other thing I wanted to have happen with this portrait was I wanted a more modern feel. So I made sure that the skin tone colors were a little bit more saturated, have a little bit more color in them. And we used this really cool Michael Harding Brilliant Pink for the background. Having a pink background is going to instantly modernize your portrait. You don't see a lot of pink backgrounds like this in old master portraits. So I'm excited to let you all know about a new digital portrait painting course that I've developed, Expressive Portraits in Oil, where you will learn to paint realistic yet painterly portraits in 6 weeks. In it, I will walk you step by step, brushstroke by brushstroke, through the Selective Start method that you've seen here today and more. I will discuss value, edges, texture. I show you how to easily mix flesh tones for light and dark skin colors, and together we'll paint 6 portraits exploring different skin colors, genders, and ages. But the key element to my course, and it is the thing that sets it apart from others, is that you will be part of my private student community, where I will critique your work, answer your questions, and be there cheering you on. As a part of this like-minded community, you will get to also help each other. We will learn from each other. It's just like when you travel to a workshop, but you never have to leave home. Your work is in front of my eyes, and I can see how to help you individually at your skill level and on your own time. The main thing that I kept in mind while making this course was how I felt when I first started learning. I was lost. It was difficult to know what I needed to learn and where to find it. I want to make it clear and easy for you to know what it is exactly that you need in order to paint the way you want. So that is why I made Expressive Portraits in Oil. This is a 6-week course that I will literally walk you brushstroke by brushstroke through each portrait. Together, we will learn to paint expressive portraits in oil. I look forward to seeing you there.